Starwalker Studios presents Game Master's Journey, a podcast all about tabletop role-playing games from the perspective of the captain's chair. Greetings, Numenarian, and welcome to episode 7 of the Obsidian Monolith, a podcast in which I will build a Numenera campaign from scratch. I'm your host, Lex Starwalker. Today, I'll discuss the second adventure in the campaign, The Heroes of Bonespur. So grab a pen, grab some paper, and get your creative juices going. It's time to create an adventure. Hello, listener. Welcome back to the Obsidian Monolith, Part 7. It has been a coon's age, as they say, since the last time I did one of these. It seems like forever. So, as I think I said in the last Obsidian Monolith, I was kind of trying to pace these with the actual play, but as I'm doing more and more, I am having less and less time to edit actual plays, and so I'm not able to keep up with them, and that's why it's been so long. And I finally decided, you know what? I'm just going to keep going with these podcasts and not worry so much about the actual play. So if you're super into the actual play, there will be some spoilers in here for the next episodes. But I really have no idea when I'm going to have time to get the next ones out. So I don't know. I'll leave that up to you. The purpose of this podcast is to walk you through my process as I create a campaign for Numenera, and this is easily applied to any role-playing game that you run. I am using Numenera as an example because I have to have some kind of an example to use to kind of illustrate what I'm doing, but the techniques and how I'm going about things are the same no matter what game you're playing. So you could easily use this for Dungeons and Dragons or World of Darkness or Pathfinder or any game that you play. So the first adventure of the campaign was called The Windmill in the Woods, and I've talked quite a bit about that. I've talked about kind of how I set up the campaign and how I set up the town of Bonespur. So with the conclusion of The Windmill in the Woods, the players have explored their first Numenera facility. They are true Numenera hunters now. And they might even have found out about the Obsidian Monolith itself. A little bit of foreshadowing there if they did find that out, or they might not have. As far as the overall campaign, it doesn't matter. They also have saved a small town from disaster. So I have two main goals with this next adventure. The first goal is I want to show the PCs the consequences of their actions. They've saved the town of Bonespur. They are heroes, and I want them to feel like heroes. I want them to see that the things they do matter in my world and that there are effects of their actions and consequences. And in this case, they're mainly good consequences, assuming that they succeeded in the first adventure. So they've saved the town of Bonespur. I want them to feel like heroes. I want them to feel like they're awesome. And also, the town of Bonespur itself can become a base for them. Now, I am planning in this campaign to move them away from Bonespur, but they can always come back. And, you know, it's really great for your character concept to not just have, you know, in your background that you wrote up, you know, this hometown or where you came from, but to actually have it be a place where you've role played and you have real connections to it and you know the NPCs. So it will really enrich their characters going forward that they all have this town, Bonespur, in common that they came from and that one day maybe they'll return to. And it's a place where they're well thought of for the most part. So my second goal is I want to pave the way for getting the PCs more involved with the conflict between the Kalovas and humans in the area. So I talked about when I was setting up the campaign that I'm really interested in this conflict between the Kalovas of the Westwood and the people of Navarine that are nearby. And one of my themes that I'm exploring with the beginning of the campaign is about this conflict and this kind of uneasy truce that the people of Bone Spur have established with the Kalovas. They have kind of a ceasefire going, and they've kind of drawn the lines and said, as long as you don't cross these lines, we'll leave you alone. But they're not friends. They're not allies. I have this event planned in the near future where the Emals are going to come on the scene with their machine, the Dark Smoker, which is a logging machine. And so they are going to come in and just screw up this tenuous alliance that has been established between the humans and the Kalovas, and it's going to be a real point of conflict. And that's kind of what I'm aiming for. So in preparation for that, I would like the PCs to kind of get to know the Kalovas better, have some interactions with them, and maybe even have kind of their own investment in this relationship between the humans and the Kalovas, and maybe even do something on their end to try to improve things. And then that way, when I have the Emal show up later, the PCs are invested in this and they care about it, and it will be much more likely that they'll get involved with that and that they'll actually be engaged with what's going on there. So some other things to consider, we've done one adventure for this campaign, and, obviously a campaign is a chain of adventures connected together. And so when you're planning your campaign, one thing you want to consider is you want to kind of mix it up with your adventures. You don't want all your adventures to be the same. You want over the course of the campaign to have different types of adventures so the players don't get bored and so they don't know what's coming next, and you can kind of keep them on their toes. So I've been getting into Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition lately, and something that they talk about that I really like is they refer to the 3 pillars of adventure, which are combat, discovery, and social interaction. And these 3 pillars work perfectly for Numenera. They probably work perfectly for about any game. Different players are going to have different preferences among those 3 pillars. Some players really like combat, some players really like social interaction, some really like discovery, and each player is going to have their own kind of spectrum of which of those they like more than the others and how much of an amount. Some players may love combat, but they don't want it all the time. Things like that. You may not be able to have all 3 pillars in every single adventure, although you should really try to have all 3 in each adventure. But at the very least, you want to try to have all 3 represented in the campaign. And ideally, through the scope of the entire campaign, you want to have all 3 of those pillars have equal weight. So once you look at the entire campaign, when it's all said and done, you want to be able to say, okay, there's about equal amounts combat, social interaction, and exploration in my campaign. Now, since we're talking about Numenera specifically here, you may want to weight the exploration pillar a little bit more, just because a lot of people coming to play Numenera, that's what they're really looking for. They want an adventure about exploration. So you're kind of safe with Numenera, at least, in giving that more weight and having a lot of exploration. But you still want to have a good amount of combat and a good amount of social interaction in there. And again, you can kind of tailor this to your group. So you may have a group of players where none of them really are into social interaction, and in that case, you don't have to worry so much about that pillar. But I would still say that you want to have it in there just to give some variety and to make the campaign feel more 3-dimensional. But you don't have to worry about, is there as much as there is combat and discovery if you have players that don't really care about social interaction. Now, combat, at least in Numenera and in a lot of games I've played, you're going to want to have combat because I did a whole episode of the GM Intrusions podcast about how Numenera really is a combat-focused game. And I talked about how if you look at all the abilities that players can get in the game of Numenera, the vast majority of them are combat related. So, if you have player characters with those abilities and you never have combat, they're going to be frustrated because they have these cool things they can do that they never get to use because there's not combat. So that's another point of advice. This is kind of one of those game master truisms, is your player character's character sheet is kind of a wish list of what they want from your campaign. So look at, what type of character they're playing, what type of abilities they're taking, and that will tell you what the player wants from your campaign. So if you have a player character that has a lot of combat abilities, it's safe to assume that that player wants some combat. And if you have a player character with a lot of social abilities, then that player probably wants lots of social stuff. So that's something to keep in mind when you're planning your adventures in your campaign, is look at the characters, look at their sheets, look at what they're taking as far as abilities, and use that to kind of inform yourself as far as, what kind of gameplay they're looking for. So the first adventure of this campaign, the Windmill in the Woods, had a lot of combat and it had a lot of exploration, but it didn't have as much social interaction, although there was still some. So this adventure, and actually the one after this one, the third adventure, will have a lot more social interaction to kind of balance that. And also in this particular adventure, there's no real combat at all. Although there are some, roles that the players can make, and in Numenera, it's like combat and everything, it all uses the same system. So it's like, I say there's no combat, but yet, for instance, a character might have a wrestling match and it resolves the same as combat. So in a way it is kind of combat, except he's probably not going to be using all his combat abilities. Another thing that you can think about is having variety in your adventures, not just in regards to the 3 pillars, but also in regards to how long they take. So the first adventure took my group 3 4-hour sessions to get through. And so the second adventure is a lot shorter. I think they can easily complete it in 1 session, which is what my players did. And so I'm mixing it up as far as length too. So we had a 3-session adventure. Now we have a 1-session adventure. And the third adventure, I think, will take about 2 sessions. And also, in a way, this adventure is kind of a transition between the first and the third adventure, which the first adventure is something major that I had happen that was like kind of a major plot point of the campaign. They encountered their first Numenera discovery, their first facility. They interacted it. They got used to that. They encountered some bizarre technology, and even had a possibility of discovering a connection to the Obsidian Monolith, which is kind of the end point of the campaign, or will be close to it. So, that adventure had a very solid role in the campaign as a whole. The next adventure, the third adventure, is going to have the PCs getting to know the Kalovas better and getting involved with the relationship between the Kalovas and the humans of Bone Spur. And then the fourth adventure is going to involve the Emals with the Black Smoker coming on the stage. So those are also major kind of stepping stones in the campaign. This adventure isn't so much a major event like that. It's more of a way to get them from adventure 1 to adventure 3. So one of the questions I've seen a lot online that kind of led to me doing this podcast is people wonder, how do you connect your adventures together in a larger campaign? So this adventure is a way that you can do that. Doing something like this where, this adventure is really connecting the first and third adventures together so that it seems to the players like it's just a continuous thing, right? With everything that's happened so far in the campaign, I think it makes a lot of sense that the townspeople of Bone Spur would consider the PCs heroes. The townspeople knew that the pollinators weren't acting normally, and that if something wasn't done about this soon, that there would be no fruits, there would be no vegetables, and there would be no crops this year, which means there would be nothing to feed the animals, and it would have led to famine and starvation, and would have been a very, very bad thing. And it's not like these people have tons of money to buy food from other places. In fact, they make their money by producing lumber and, to a smaller degree, food and stuff to export. So it seems like, obviously they would really be happy that the PCs have solved this problem and would consider them heroes. And I think it makes sense that they would have a feast in their honor to celebrate the fact that the PCs are awesome, basically. And I think it's appropriate for them to have a feast, partly because I think that's what villagers would do in this world to celebrate, and partly because, what better way to celebrate the averting of a possible famine than having a feast and celebrating the plenty that you have. So this will be a chance for the players to enjoy some role playing after a very combat heavy set of encounters, a very combat heavy adventure. Those PCs who have social abilities will get plenty of chances to use them. In this adventure, the PCs will meet the mayor of the town if they haven't already met her. So this could be the first time they meet her, or maybe not. Maybe they met her before. But even if they did meet her before, now she holds them in much higher regard. Before they were just people that she met, but now they're the saviors of her town. So she's pretty impressed with them. I also want to reward the PCs for a job well done. Presumably at this point, they've succeeded in their first adventure, a good 3 or more gaming sessions of role playing. They were successful. They achieved their goal. They did something very heroic, and they encountered and survived a lot of serious dangers in doing so. So they've really accomplished something. And I want the players to feel like they've accomplished something and feel like that there are rewards and benefits for that. And another part of this is it reinforces the reality of your world and makes it seem multidimensional when the players can see things happening in your world and changes occurring in your world because of things that they've done. So some of the rewards that I came up with that the PCs will enjoy and find out about during this adventure is Madame Sadel will provide them with free room and board at her inn for as long as they remain in her high regard. So, they don't have to pay to stay at the inn. They don't have to pay for food. And they can enjoy that for basically forever as long as they don't do anything to screw up their reputation with Madame Sadel and the town as a whole. Another reward that they will enjoy is that the merchants of Bone Spur will give them a discount on all mundane goods. So this will be 50% off the price of purchases, basically selling them for cost. And the merchants will buy used items from the PCs for 75% of the price instead of 50%. Now this only applies to mundane equipment. This doesn't apply to oddities or ciphers or armor made from some special material or something. This is just normal stuff. And it also only applies to merchants that live in the town, not any traveling merchants that are visiting from other places. Each PC also gets a free glowing plant from Krail Sult, and this is basically the equivalent of a major glow globe that as long as they take care of this plant, they will always have a major glow globe, which if you don't know, it's like a regular glow globe, only it never runs out of energy. Also, the PCs have this feast/festival held in their honor. This is a three-day festival with feasting, games, and contests. And it's possible that the PCs will receive multiple offers of marriage from either young people in the town or the parents of young people in the town if they make it known that they plan to settle down and remain in the town long term. Now, most PCs probably are not planning to live here, but you might have some PCs that have kind of made it known that once their adventuring days are over, they're going to come back and retire in Bone Spur. And if you have a PC like that, I think it's very likely that they will have some offers of marriage. They also will receive a commendation from Moshe An, the Eon priest in the town. So if a PC is not yet a member of the Order of Truth and she wants to be, Moshe will induct her and send her paperwork to Key. If a PC is already a member, then Moshe sends a commendation and recommendation for promotion to Key. And also from now on, Moshe will identify Numenera items for free within reason. I mean, it's up to you as a GM to decide how many items Moshe has time to identify in, say, a week or whatever. So if the PCs bring him 50 items, he may not identify them all, but within reason, he will do that. Probably that won't be needed. I've never had a group of players in Numenera that weren't able to identify their own items, but it's there if you need it or if they need it. this encounter with Moshe that the PCs have, which is presumably, after they get back to town and they kind of go to Moshe and give them their report of what happened, because he did tell them when he sent them out that he was very curious about the windmill and wanted to know about it, what they discovered in there. So when they talk to him and he gives them their commendations and everything, this is a great opportunity for the PCs to learn some more about Moshe, learn why he's in Bone Spur, and some of his history with the Order of Truth, namely that he was demoted for disagreeing with the Crusades. And I also give a hook in this conversation into an optional adventure I came up with for the campaign called the Obsidian Monolith. And this is an adventure that actually has nothing to do with the campaign as a whole, but it's something that the PCs can go do if they want to. And the reason for this is I always like to have side plots and side quests and things like that in my adventures or my campaigns, because if you don't, it kind of breaks the realism or the feel of realism in your game if every single thing the PCs do or every favor that someone asks of them is directly tied into your main plot, right? It just seems very contrived. So I like to present kind of side quests or side plots or things that maybe NPCs ask the PCs to do, or things that they discover that they could investigate that have nothing to do with the overall story. And then those are things that the PCs can look into or not as they choose. But just the fact that it's there makes your story seem more multidimensional. And it also can help kind of obscure which missions are directly related to the story or not, right? Like if all you do is give the PCs missions that tie into your plot, then it's kind of like this railroad that they follow, and they just do every mission you give them, and it's a no-brainer, right? But if you're giving them missions that really have nothing to do with anything, it may not be obvious to them, which missions are quote unquote important and which aren't. And then they have to make decisions about what they're going to do. And what I really like to do is I like to give them more to do than they can do, to where they have to make decisions. They're like, well, we have these 5 things we could do, these 5 quests, if you will, but we don't have time to do all of them. So which ones are we going to do? And, if they don't necessarily know which ones are the ones related to the main plot and which ones aren't, then that's really fun. And, behind the scenes, maybe you can tie them all into the main plot somehow. Or maybe if they skip one that's tied into the main plot, you can tie one of the others in. As GM, there's a lot you can do to make whatever they decide to do work. But I really like having these side adventures. And so this particular adventure, it's actually a really simple adventure, and it's an example of how you can just take a creature from the bestiary or the core book and just kind of build a little adventure around it. So basically if you look in the Ninth World Bestiary, there's a creature called the Obsidian Monolith, which is this immobile creature. It's a kind of like a biological construct or something, if I remember right. And it just stays in one place and doesn't really do anything, but it has this kind of gem eye that if you get close enough, it can shoot energy beams at you. So it is kind of dangerous. And if you destroy one of these things, you can take that gem eye and you can use it to recharge an artifact. So if you look in the Numenera core book, and I think I talked about this in one of the previous episodes, but it talks about how the city of Charmand does not have a wall. Instead, it has 4 like force field projectors, basically, that can create an energy field around the entire city that protects it. However, the Aeon priests believe that these are failing, and they don't know how many uses they have left before they won't work anymore. So they use them very sparingly, and in fact, they haven't been used within living memory. So basically, Moshe heard about these Obsidian monoliths from a merchant who encountered one in the Black Riage Mountains. And he did some research into them, found some accounts of other Aeon priests that had encountered them and kind of studied them, and learned about this ability that this gem has to recharge artifacts. And it occurred to him that one or more of these could be used to recharge these artifacts around Charmand. Well, as luck would have it, just about the time, he figured all this out and he was going to plan an expedition to find one of these things and study it and see if it would work, That was when he got demoted by the Order because of some demonstrations he'd done against the Crusades, and he was forced to leave Charmand. And at the time, Moshe's kind of he's got a temper, and he was pretty pissed at the Order, and he was kind of like, fuck those guys, and he just left, and he kept his idea to himself. Well, now years have gone by, and now he's kind of like, well, the Order is a bunch of dicks, and I am pissed at the big cheeses in Charmand and Key for what they did to me. But I love the city of Charmand. I love the people of Charmand, and the Crusades are happening, even though I don't want them to. And every year that goes by, it's more likely that the Gaians are going to, get into the Steadfast and start attacking us back and making us pay for what we're doing to them. And so Charmand could be in danger in the future, and, he doesn't want anything to happen to the city. And so, there's a chance here that he can tell the PCs about this idea and say, hey, if you're ever in Charmand or near Charmand, you could kind of look into this, and if it works, this will get you a lot of respect and standing within the Order of Truth and within Charmand if my scheme actually works, and you can kind of take credit for it. So the way I did it in my game was I had the PCs were just talking to him and kind of shooting the shit, and I waited for an appropriate moment, and then I allowed the PCs to make a perception or a social interaction roll to notice that he seemed, even though he was praising them for everything that they'd done, he seemed like kind of distracted, like something was on his mind. One of the PCs actually rolled a 20 on that roll, so I even went so far as to say that he realized that something was really bothering Moshe, and it had something to do with the Order of Truth, because this kind of cloud came over him when he talked about giving them commendations and sending them to Key. And so, then the player asked about that, what was going on. And then that's when Moshe told him about kind of what had happened with him and Charmand and with the Order and getting demoted and sent to this backwater town. And in the course of, role playing out that conversation, this scheme of his came out. So you could do it in a very similar way. Now, something else that happened, and this was just, I didn't plan this, it just happened. But when I was rolling for random ciphers for the PCs to find within the windmill, I rolled up a long-range teleporter cipher, which I think allowed the PCs to go allowed a PC to go 600 miles or something like that. So they found that in the windmill, and one of my players, Jeremy Land, had the genius idea of asking Moshe if there was any way he could modify this cipher so it could teleport the whole party instead of just one character, thinking that, if we decide we want to go to Charmand, we could just teleport there. How awesome would that be? So I thought that was an awesome idea. And so I had Moshe work on it, and he worked on it throughout this adventure, and I think the next couple adventures, and then eventually told the PCs that he'd work something out. And basically what he did was he built something basically like a Faraday cage that the PCs could just barely all squeeze in, and he hooked this cipher to it. And so this thing allowed them to teleport to Charmand, which saved them a lot of time when they needed to go there further in the campaign. So that worked really well, and it was really nice not to have to worry about this huge journey across Navarine from Bone Spur to Charmand and just be able to have them teleport. So, if you are going to run this campaign yourself, I really recommend that you do that and you put that teleporter in the windmill somewhere and let them have it. And hopefully one of the PCs will have that idea. If they don't, you could drop them a hint, or you could even have Moshe suggest it when it comes up that they need to go to Charmand. So as I said, one of the main goals of this adventure is to allow the players to enjoy being heroes and enjoy the attention of the townspeople. And it also gives them a chance to relax and role play after a dangerous and stressful adventure. I give them as much time with this as they want. They can participate in the various contests going on. For instance, in my game when I ran it, Brian Kern's character, who is a Jack, did just that, and he decided to do some like acrobatics and stuff, and some other people kind of came and joined him, and he ended up creating a gymnastics competition, which was not in my original list of competitions I came up with, but was awesome. And then Craig Edwards, who's playing a glaive in my game, he took on a few lumberjacks all at once in the wrestling match and managed to defeat them with some awesome rolls, so that was a lot of fun. So you can do stuff like that. There's races and, probably like knitting contests and all kinds of stuff, like any kind of contest you can think of that, shows off the skills that people in a village like this would have. Obviously, there's a lot of lumberjacks, so there's probably a contest where who can chop down a tree the fastest or something like that. But, just give your PCs as much time as they want to do whatever they want in the town. And this is a great time to introduce NPCs that you fleshed out, and to flesh out more of the town, and let the PCs kind of explore the town and interact with NPCs and have all the fun and role playing that they want. But you don't want to let them get bored. So as a GM, you can kind of just sit back and you can role play with them, and you can kind of gauge their level of engagement with what's going on, and you'll be able to tell when things are kind of starting to wind down and they've kind of had their fill of it. And when that happens, then you bring a scene on them. And so basically, in my game, when it seemed like the players were kind of winding down with the RP, I went on to the feast that the town throws in their honor. So there's this huge feast, and there's a lot of eating and drinking, and this takes place in a common area outside in the town where they have all these long tables and benches that they put together for this, and everybody in the town's together eating and drinking, and there's music and everything. This happens at night, so it's all lit by torchlight and everything. And while this is going on, the players are, and again, this is a role-playing opportunity, so you can kind of see if any of them want to do something with that. But again, when the RP dies down, there's a lumberjack from the town that approaches the group, and he announces very loudly so that everybody can hear that his daughter has disappeared into the Westwood. She had gone on her own to negotiate with the Kalovas, hoping to improve relations between the Bone Spurns and the Kalovas. She's this really smart girl, probably like late teens, early 20s. It doesn't really matter whatever age you want her to be. Old enough that, she knows what she's about. She's really smart. She learned the Kalova language from father on, and she's kind of a progressive thinker. And she's really frustrated with the people of Bone Spur's reluctance to interact with their Kalova neighbors. The way I played it is I detailed the mayor of the town quite a bit, who's a woman named Annika, and the mayor actually agreed. The mayor is originally not from Bone Spur. She's from elsewhere, and she'd come to the town about 10 years ago, and the rumor is her husband had died sometime before that, but no one knows for sure because the mayor won't speak of it one way or the other. But the mayor came 10 years ago, and she has since become mayor, and she's very devoted to the town, and awesome person, and a great NPC you can do a lot with if you want. But she, is a little bit more worldly than most of the people of the town, and she actually wants to have a better relationship with the Kalovas, but the people of the town just won't have it. They're superstitious and they're backwards, and they just can't get past the fact that these guys look like spiders and they must be monsters. So she agrees with this girl and kind of admires her. But long story short, this girl, got frustrated with nobody listening to her and decided to take off on her own to go to the nearby Kalova village and talk to them because she knew their language. So she's been gone too long. It's been long enough. She should have, been back by now, and her father's worried, and he wants the PCs to go find her. Now, the way I set this up, the PCs are going to have a really hard time refusing him because he asked them in front of literally the whole town in a loud and booming voice that everyone hears. And the way I kind of did it is, when he started talking to them, I had the music stop and everybody stopped their conversations and turned to watch, this guy who's actually one of the more respected men in the town talk to these new heroes and see what he has to say and what what they do, because most of the people in the town know that his daughter is missing. And so they, want to see if the heroes are going to solve this problem too. So obviously, if they refuse, everybody's going to know, and it's really going to jeopardize their status of heroes. And presumably they've been enjoying kind of being the center of attention. So chances are good that they're going to agree to do this. And besides that, it's like the heroic thing to do, and it's, something to do. You've given them plenty of chance to role play, so they're probably ready for some action again, right? So if the PCs accept this mission, then the next morning, the father and some of the other lumberjacks take them to the logging camp down the canal and show them, the direction the girl headed into the Westwood, which is towards this Kalova village, which is the same village that the Kalovas belong to that the PCs met and interacted with before. So the PCs will be able to track the path that she took on her way to the nearby Kalova village. And so that is the second adventure, which I called The Heroes of Bone Spur. It's a lot of role playing, it's a lot of social interaction, and it ties the first and the third adventure together. So they return from the first adventure successful. They see all these benefits of helping the town out, and they get to enjoy that until they're sick of it. And then we have our hook into the next adventure. Well, that's going to wrap up Game Master's Journey. If you would like to reach me, you can email me at gamemastersjourney@gmail.com. Please go find me on Google+. You can just search for Lex Starwalker. And please join the Game Master's Journey Google+ community. You can find a link to it on our website at starwalkerstudios.com in the Game Master's Journey show notes. And please follow me on Twitter at Lex Starwalker. Please call the voicemail 626-LEX-GMI1. And again, please visit our website, starwalkerstudios.com. There you can find the show notes for this show. You can find helpful links to our Google+ community, and you can also find our other podcasts that we put out. So once again, I thank you for joining me on my journey as a game master, and I look forward to coming back next week. So until then, game on.
This has been a Starwalker Studios production, your source for quality gaming and hobby podcasts.
This episode's music provided by Cloudwalker, Renfield, Transboy, and Ish. Please see the show notes for more details at starwalkerstudios.com/GameMastersJourney.